Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Magnus Carlsen, the highest-rated player in chess history, faces the reigning world rapid champion, Abdusattorov. Can he overcome this rising star? Let's dive into their thrilling encounter from round 4 of the Tata Steel India Blitz 2024. Facing a challenging opponent like Abdusattorov, Magnus Carlsen cautiously opened the game with 1. c4. Abdusattorov promptly responded with 1. c5, opting for the English opening to counter the world champion. White followed up with 2 g3, aiming to fianchetto the bishop to g2, strategically controlling the long diagonal h1a8. Black mirrored this idea, pushing 2 e6 with the intent to place the bishop on g7 and dominate the other major diagonal. White continued with 3 bg2, targeting the queen's side, while black developed 3 bg7, aiming for central influence. White deployed the knight to c3, exerting pressure on the center. Black mirrored again with 4 nc6. White moves the pawn to d4. Black also moves the pawn to d6, a move that might have tested even Carlsen's patience. After some deliberation, White played 5 qd2, posing the question, would Abdusattorov continue the symmetry? Breaking the trend, black played 5 f6, accelerating development. White pushed 6 b3, preparing to fianchetto the other bishop to b2 and contest black's powerful g7 bishop on the long diagonal. Black quickly castled kingside with 6, securing the king in anticipation of the middle game battle. White carried out the plan with 7 bb2, directly challenging black's control of the long diagonal. In response, black sidestepped with 7 rb8, temporarily avoiding the gaze of the bishop on b2. White 8 e3, while black began preparing queenside counterplay by advancing a6. White continued development with 9 ne2, aiming to mobilize the kingside pieces efficiently. Black, ever cautious, placed the bishop on bd7, shielding the c6 knight before executing the b5 advance. Not wanting to leave the king exposed in the center for long, White castled kingside with 10, and entering the middle game poised for the fight ahead. After meticulous preparation, black boldly advanced the pawn to b5, initiating a queenside offensive. White responded by leaping the knight to d5, seizing control of the center, and clearing the way for the bishop on b2 to showcase its strength along the long diagonal. Black pushed the pawn to e6, driving White's knight away from its strategic post in the center. White immediately exchanged the knight on f6, and black recaptured with the bishop on f6. Seeing the exposed position of black's bishop, White wasted no time and recaptured with the bishop on f6. Black recaptured with the queen. White to bring the rook to c1, activating it on the open c-file. Black followed suit, moving the rook to c8, aligning both heavy pieces on the queen side to counter White's growing initiative. White brought another heavy piece into action with rd1, strengthening control over the central file. Black jumped the knight to ne with the aim of advancing to f3 to capture the queen and check. Not wanting to lose the powerful bishop on g2, White pushed f4, driving the knight away. Black retreated the knight to its earlier position on c8. White then played nc, preparing to bring additional forces into the fray. Black repositioned the queen with q7, consolidating the defense. White, meanwhile, maneuvered the queen to qb2, exerting control over the long diagonal a1h8. Recognizing the threat, black countered with qf6, contesting dominance over the diagonal. White calmly advanced rd2, reinforcing the queen, securing the second rank and unpinning the knight for potential redeployment when needed. Confident with the queen controlling the long diagonal against White's queen, black moved the king to f8. After preparing his forces, White decisively advanced d4, seizing the center. It seemed like a favorable move for black. Black captured the pawn on d4. Without hesitation, White leapt the knight to e4, attacking the queen. Black responded by retreating the queen to e7, avoiding the attack, at which point White captured the pawn on d4, restoring balance in material. Black then jumped the knight to a5, threatening to capture White's pawn on c4. Undeterred, White pushed the pawn to d5, breaking through the center and opening the path for the queen to rush to h8 for a potential checkmate. Realizing the danger, black hastily advanced the pawn to e5, closing the dangerous diagonal. However, The QH8 Plus was merely a distraction, a feint from Magnus Carlsen. The true battlefront for white now lay in the center, where white continued pushing the pawn to c5, launching a swift attack through the heart of black's position. In this scenario, if black captures the pawn on c5, white would respond by capturing the pawn on e5, creating a powerful central pawn duo that threatens to advance to e6, attacking the bishop and opening the path for the queen to deliver checkmate on h8. Whether black moves the king to g8 or retreats the bishop to g4, both would fall into the line of fire of white's knight on e4, with the knight ready to jump to f6, delivering check, hoa capturing the bishop. Alternatively, if black moves the bishop to f5 to drive away the knight, white would advance the pawn to d6, attacking the queen. After the queen moves to e6 to avoid the threat, white would jump the knight to g5, attacking the queen while also threatening to capture the pawn on h7 and check. If black moves the queen to d7 or retreats to e8, white would still push the pawn to e6, threatening checkmate on h. If black tries to escape with kg8, white would capture the pawn on f7, delivering check and the capture of the queen, leaving black unable to defend. Returning to the game, after losing control of the center, black took a risky decision move the bishop to f5, aiming to eliminate white's knight and reduce the pressure from white's attack. White captured the pawn on d6 with the knight, delivering a double attack on the rook and bishop. In this position, if black moved the rook to d8 to avoid the attack, white would capture the pawn on d5, threatening checkmate on h8, and forcing black to exchange queens on e5. White would recapture with the pawn on e5, establishing a powerful central pawn trio and gaining a decisive advantage. Back to the actual game, realizing the danger, black made a bold decision to sacrifice the rook on c5, hoping to break white's relentless attack. White calmly captured the rook on c5, and black quickly responded by capturing white's knight on d6 to destroy the dangerous knight in his position. White moved the queen to c3, combining with the rook to fully control the open c-file. In a desperate position, black moved the rook to c8, consolidating and preparing to open the e-file in search of counterplay. White immediately transferred the rook to e2, ready for battle. Not willing to sit idle and await defeat, black advanced the pawn to e4, attacking white's queen. White accepted the gift and captured the pawn on b4. Black rapidly retreated the knight to b7, aiming to attack white's rook. Unfazed, white moved the rook back to c4, protecting the queen. Black captured the pawn on f4, opening the a-file and making the two rooks look at each other with sparks flying. Seeing that black was in a weakened position but still challenging, white took the initiative by capturing the rook on e8 and check. Black recaptured with the king moving to e8. White then captured the knight on b7 with the queen. Instinctively, black moved the queen to e5, aiming to maneuver down to e1 for a check. Not allowing black any counterplay, white swiftly moved the queen to a8, delivering a check. Black moved the king to e7 to evade the check, but white followed up with qa7, delivering a second check. Black moved the king to f8, and after securing the diagonal g1 a7 with the queen, white moved the rook to f4, capturing the pawn. At this point, white's rook was poised to retreat to f1 to defend the first rank, effectively controlling the game. Realizing there was no way to defend, Abdusattorov stopped the clock and resigned because he was one rook behind. If black attempts to resist, the game might unfold as follows.